As a security professional, you may be tasked with assessing risk. Risks can take on many forms, from malicious attackers to security patches to malware. But how do we prioritize these risks? This is where risk assessment enters the equation. Risk assessment is the process of identifying and triaging the risks facing an organization based upon the likelihood of their occurrence and expected impact they will have on an organization's operations. Before we continue, however, we should provide some clarity. It is commonplace to use the terms risk, threat, and vulnerability interchangeably. The reality, however, is that these are three different concepts. A vulnerability is a weakness in the system that allows a threat source to compromise its security. It could be a software, hardware, or a human weakness that can be exploited. A vulnerability may be a service running on a server, unpatched applications, an unrestricted wireless access point, an open port on a firewall, locks, physical security that allows anyone to enter a server room, or unenforced password management on servers and workstations. A threat is any potential danger that is associated with the exploitation of a vulnerability. If the threat is that someone will identify a specific vulnerability and use it against the company or individual, then the entity that takes advantage of the vulnerability is referred to as a threat agent. A threat agent could be an intruder accessing the network through a port on a firewall, a process accessing data in a way that violates security policy, or an employee circumventing controls in order to copy files to a medium that could expose confidential information. A risk is the likelihood of a threat source exploiting a vulnerability and the corresponding business impact. If a firewall has several ports open, there is a higher likelihood that an intruder will use one to access the network in an unauthorized method. If users are not educated on the process and procedures, there is a higher likelihood that an employee will make an unintentional mistake that may destroy data. If an intrusion detection system is not implemented on a network, there is a higher likelihood that an attack will go unnoticed until it is too late. Risk ties the vulnerability, threat, and likelihood of an exploitation to the resulting business impact. If we were to visually describe this in a Venn diagram, you would see something that looks like this. You can see that risk is the area that crosses over between threat and vulnerability. While we are providing clarity on terminology, it is important that you are also familiar with the term threat vector. A threat vector is the route that a malicious attack may take to get past your defense and infect your network. The next step in the risk assessment process ranks those risks by two factors: likelihood and impact. The likelihood of a risk is the probability that it will actually occur. For example, there is a risk of hurricanes in Florida and Louisiana. When you look at the data, however, you find the probability of hurricanes in Florida is significantly higher than Louisiana. Therefore, as a security professional, you may be hypervigilant about the risk of hurricanes in Florida, whereas in Louisiana, you may ignore it. The impact of a risk is the amount of damage that will occur if a risk materializes. For example, a hurricane may wipe out the data center altogether, whereas a minor flood may cause only some damage.